there everybody, this is Ann and welcome back to Painting Big. Today we are going to tackle another NMM video, very simplified NMM video. This one's going to be on a shoulder pad, a pretty elaborate shoulder pad. Let's get to it. Alrighty. So I was looking around for something where I could do a curved shoulder pad for you guys, and the only guy I had like really set was this big Templar guy with the huge monster shoulder pads, the World of Warcraft shoulder pads, for lack of a better term. And so we're going to do this. We're going to do it as simple as I can. I probably won't blend a lot. I just want to kind of show you kind of working from that last plate that we did on the orc, the rounded plate. Kind of show you how to take that same kind of curved surface philosophy and put it onto a shoulder pad, which is also curved. So the shoulder pad is more curved, but it's still going to have that same kind of thing going on where the area that's facing the most upward, that's getting the most light, is going to have that kind of straight highlight going down it. Of course, this time it's much longer, so it's going to look more like a linear highlight. We've got to watch for this fin too. So in reality, what we might want to do is put our shadows in first so that we can kind of keep the track of those, because anything that's in shadow isn't really going to get that highlight, right? This piece, for example, if I tilt the miniature upward, you can see that this piece that's more at an angle is just not getting as much light, and this fin on the interior part of it is definitely in shadow. So let's take that information and block in our shadows first. So once again, for my colors today, again, very simple. My basic one is MSP, Reaper MSP, that's what I use. Cloudy Gray 9089 with one drop of Carbon Gray 9318, just to give it a little more coverage and a little bit darker. I like to start a little darker on my NMM these days. That's what my base coat is. We've got Gray Liner, and I have mixed just a little bit of this into that. Gray Liner can sometimes be a little bit weird and translucent if it has no white at all in it, so I like to mix just a little bit of my base in there. It still stays dark enough usually for the shadow. This is going to be, again, my starting color with white in it, 2 drops of white with like 2 brushfuls of this, and then we've got pure white. I did add a color to this just for fun. I added a blue-green today. It doesn't really matter. I should say one thing, and that is that if you know what your basing or your surroundings of your miniature are going to be, you can use one of those colors to put into this, and it works just fine. I know I kind of default to a blue because if I've got an upraised weapon, I like to have that kind of sky feel to it, like I told you guys, but you don't have to do that. You can do anything you like. So let's sketch in. I'm just going to grab the shadow. We're just going to block really quick. Let's just really try to do this really simplified. Blocking that shadow there. Now this, as you can see, isn't as straight. This fin is really straight up and down. This is more of an angle. I'm still going to put a shadow in there though, because if the light is coming from my Zenith primer, I could see that this is actually going to get a bit of shadow. So I'm just going to block again. I'm going to block that in. More toward the top of the curve, because this part here, this little sliver of light actually would be getting just a little bit of light, maybe not toward the back. And then here, maybe I want to wet blend a little bit to make the bottom part of this area a little bit lighter. So that the top part is darker. Because this little part, there's going to be light reflecting off of this flat area right here, and it's probably going to create a highlight here. And we're also going to be painting this flat area a bit lighter. So we'll just leave that. And then, although we're not really working on a lot of these outside areas, I would just like block this in darker. That area, underside areas I tend to leave black. You could, if you wanted to worry about the inside area, you could also do this. Now here his face is right here, so if you were going to put a reflective color in here, you could take his skin tone and put a bit of that in this area that we're otherwise painting dark, because there would be light reflecting off of his skin, and you would probably see that in the metal. Unless, of course, the areas of the shoulder pad facing him are like, you know, painted or have some kind of cushion on them or something to protect his face from banging into them. You never know. Really, you can do whatever you like. And really, that's with miniatures, that's just true. You can do whatever you like. All right, we'll just make this a little darker. I'm going to just bring in a little heavier line right under that lip. You can see it where it comes in a little heavier. And again, I'm not going to blend much today. I want to get this one done and out to you. Okay. So setup, very basic shadow. In fact, this is almost like cell shaded, right? Like we could just do cell shading with this if we really wanted to. The other thing I'm going to do is actually, since I did lighten this a bit, I'm going to take my dark color and I'm going to paint over each of these little rivets. The easiest thing to do with rivets is just to paint them dark, and then when you come in to do the highlight, you can just touch a little bit on the surface of them and highlight them, and they're done. You don't have to, when you're doing a really small model like this, 28mm, you really don't have to get more than that. All right, let us go to it. So now, next highlights. I'm going to take my light gray. I haven't thinned this very much. But let's paint the upper part of the shoulder pad lighter. Right? Something like that. And I want these, since this shoulder pad is kind of 2, but I want these to be parallel, right? I want the highlight to come down pretty much the same way on both. I might fix this a little bit more. There we go. And remember also that we probably have some reflected light down here. So let's just hit the bottom parts of this. Right? Starting to see that come together. I'm going to extend this a little bit here. Oh, sorry, the hammer was in the way, but you see where I put that line. Just extending it a little bit more toward the back. And I faded it in a little bit by adding a bit of my base coat mixed in, just to blend it just a tiny bit. So you can see that coming together. Now let's put pure white, just pure white highlight. And here, you tend to put the light, and I've mentioned this before, it's hard to visualize, but if the viewer is here, the highlight as it came down would bounce toward the viewer's eye from about there. And if you're close, it's good enough, but this is what you're trying to mimic. The fact that in reality, the highest highlight doesn't go up on the top. I mean, it does, and usually I'll do a secondary up there, but it more than that, like the point that's pointed toward the viewer's eye, if this whole thing was made of mirrors, the mirror that is directed, you know, at like this angle is usually the one that looks right, and then it drops off too much, right? Like if when I'm looking at this guy, I'm actually at this angle or I'm looking directly at that space when I'm painting. More or less. So just something to kind of think about when you're doing NMM, you're thinking about viewing angles and specifically your observer viewing angle. And the closer you can nail that, like the more real it will look. It's hard. I know that's hard to explain. It's why NMM is so darn hard, is because you're trying to understand how light works, how it travels, how it bounces, everything else. So I've got just a little bit of white up there. It's kind of cheating a little bit, but again, it is pointed up. We'd see it a little bit. It's more this line right here that we'd probably get the white reflection on. Now let's do some white edging. And then maybe we'll look at it, we'll figure out we probably need darker shadow here. So this can be hard if the edge isn't well sculpted. This is just a bones model, so sometimes the edges aren't super sharp. But I'm just going to put as thin of a line as I can get on this edge. And get it down there. Pretty much will hit all the edges. Edge. Out here it's a little easier. I have a little more room and the angle's sharper to do that one. Technically, you could do something here. That's kind of debatable, but I think it works, so we'll do it. Likewise, remember, you have a edge there. And then I'm going to get those rivets. I'm going to use the light gray first. And then I'll come back and try to do a really tiny dot of white on top of them. They're big rivets. And then we're going to do a reflected light too. That'll be in just a sec. So remember, a little bit, and then try to hit it with just a kind of a pop of white. So the tops look okay. We're going to make more dark though. So we want a little bit more darkness because we need that contrast. Remember, it won't look really shiny. Like it looks shiny here, notice, because you know why? We've got this big shadow here. But here, not so much. So I'm going to take my shadow, which I didn't really put on this area, and I'm going to add a shadow in. And again, the shinier the object, the more chrome-like the object, the more you're going to see this kind of like banded effect, the more you're going to see the closer, actually, your dark will get to your light. But notice how that affected it now. So that's looking pretty good. So now I talked about doing kind of reflected light. So I'm going to do that right in line with this highlight. So let's grab our middle, actually our base coat first. And I'm going to lighten up the area. I'm not going to go all the way to the top. I still want a little shadow line up there, but then I'm going to grab a little bit of the light gray. And I'm going to see if I can just like suggest a little bit. Got a little bit of highlight. That's not doing real good. Let's see if we can expand it a little bit. There we go. So we just needed to create that line of reflection down there. Now what I can do is actually mix my light gray a little bit more with my white, and keeping it just like a little bit of a crease right here, I'm going to put in a lighter line here. There we go. So now you can see how it feels like that light is kind of bouncing up there. Maybe I want to lighten it up a little bit more. There. And you never want your reflected light to be as bright as your main highlights, right? But maybe I could sneak in a little bit of white right here where that other highlight is. Boom. And now we're seeing it. And I haven't blended any of this. It's all bands. Right? It's all just bands and brush strokes. But when you move farther away, it looks right. And that's really one of the key things, right? So let's do a little bit of shadow right up here. I also forgot to edge up there. So let's edge this fin. Edge that. Edge this side of that. And kind of see where it goes all the way down here. We didn't edge this. We didn't edge the interior. There we go. Oh, I gotta blurf that a little bit. Oh, that's alright. I can fix it in a second. Let's edge the top. So I was never a big fan of doing the white edging, but I think that especially on 28mm, it tends to pop things very nicely. If you're doing a high impact, very high contrast style on a bigger model, it works for that as well. I think the bigger you get, the more realism rewards you. But I mean, there's nothing that says that you can't do a high impact stylistic take on any miniature, no matter what the scale is. I'm gonna take this white back there. And again, right here, we could do a different, another line of white, right? We could pop in along that fin. It's kind of, like I said, hard to do, but you can see it. And then we can do another bit of light, right, up the side of this. Now here we're getting a little bit away from things, right, because we're starting to be pointed backwards. So here would be more of a stylistic choice rather than doing one here. Would be more of a stylistic choice rather than a realistic choice, but let's go for it because otherwise that blank spot looks featureless. So we'll pop it in there. Leave some dark on either side, and then we'll grab a little bit of our lighter gray. Make kind of a little bit. I don't think it's as successful here. But it at least breaks up that gray a little bit. I feel like we need a little bit more there. It's a little bit better. I would have to play with it. I would totally play with this and see, like, maybe I need to take it all the way up to there. Or maybe not, you know. So even I have to mess around with this stuff every once in a while. With weird shapes and stuff, you just don't know. You're like, And on occasion, I'll actually make, like, forms out of, like, I'll take a metal model and try to find the shape that's similar and, like, look at it under the light, or I'll try to make a shape out of tinfoil or something, you know, just to see how the light really acts. And I'll mess with it until I get it, like, a little bit better. I still feel like I need more dark there now. But you understand. I'm trying to get there. Okay, that's okay. The rest is better, but that's okay. So there you go. That's just a very basic. And again, we're not tackling this. This is kind of cut under, so if I did anything, I might do a little bit of highlight, like lining there, to bring that bottom of that shoulder pad out. And again, use your white, right? If you're gonna start integrating this piece there. So that looks pretty good. Do a little bit of a touch up on my fumble here to make that line thinner. There we go. All right, guys. So that's a very simplified shoulder NMM. And if you were just painting a simple shoulder pad that was just one plate, you would essentially do it this same way. You wouldn't have to worry about this reflected light or any of this stuff, but you'd just be painting it like one of these panels here. And it would kind of mirror it toward the back. The back really depends on your lighting philosophy. Some painters will light the model as if it's lit from both the front and the back because they don't like painting one entire side of the model in shadow. Others, like I tend to be that way. Others, like my husband, David Diamondstone, he'll have a very direct, frontal light. He doesn't care if he's going to have the back in shadow, and then he's putting a very minimal, like kind of surrounding ambient light reflection on the back. That's a lot more complicated than we can cover in these videos. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this. I hope that some of this makes sense to you. I hope you're starting to understand some of the principles that we're doing here. Remember, we're still doing our highlight, shadow, and then reflection, right? You can see it. Highlight, shadow, reflected light, all going from the direction of the light. So if this metal surface was, having light come from the side, you'd be doing that with that as a reference, right? That's why doing directed light from different directions gets very, very fiddly when you're doing NMM. All right, so we'll call it there. Thanks so much. I am going to be doing a PDF of both the previous lesson with the plate on the orc and the shoulder pad. They use some similar philosophies since they're both rounded partial cylinders, essentially, when you get down to the fundamentals of the shape that you're painting. So that'll be up on my Patreon, which is just patreon.com/paintingbig, and it'll be the $2 tier. So for one combined PDF, it's going to be a bargain this month. I'll get that up probably within a week or so. All right, thanks so much, everybody, and I hope you're enjoying the series. This is Anne signing off.